Hello, I'm going to go through the Cold War essays very quickly now. Many things to do with the Cold War. First chapter, this will most definitely come out tomorrow, so please listen carefully. Okay, first one, what led to worsening relations? Now I'm only going to go through one question, but I believe that depending on the question, you can just adjust how you answer it based on this factors, so the main factors. So what led to the worsening relations between the US and the Soviets? Okay, first thing, Yalta Conference. Okay, they met before the end of World War II to discuss plans for post-war Germany. Stalin was concerned about future and security of Soviet Union. Okay, but Roosevelt wanted peace and freedom for all. US side, so US side wanted peace and freedom for all, but Stalin wanted future and security of the Soviet Union. So they couldn't decide whether Germany should have economic recovery or Germany should be kept weak and not be a threat. So how you argue this is because of these differences, it was highlighted especially in this conference, which thus led to the strained relationship between the two superpowers. Okay, Potsdam is the same thing. The key thing is to bring out the differences which led to worsening relations and of course tensions and bipolarity. Okay, so in this case you will see that Potsdam is to further deepen differences, especially in Poland. So Poland, Stalin acted against non-communism. Against the non-communists in Poland. US dropped the atomic bomb, so this means that they no longer needed Stalin's help to conquer Japan. To free Japan from the imperialists. And Germany's division, they couldn't agree on how to settle Germany, which part should constitute which zone, who will have what in Germany, in post-war Germany. And they also couldn't agree on the reparation amount for Germany. Okay, so Poland was supposed to have free elections, but Stalin didn't let the free elections happen, so this led to a great retaliation. But more importantly is Germany couldn't decide Germany reparation and which part belongs to who. So therefore this conference only seek to bring out the differences between the two countries, leading to tensions, leading to worsening relations. Okay, and these are the three people: Roosevelt, Stalin and Churchill shaking hands at the Potsdam Conference, looking as if they made a deal, but actually they didn't, and only led to worsening of tensions. Okay, post-war Europe. Europe was state of disaster. Okay, everything was destroyed, and the original superpowers, Britain, France, Italy and Germany, lost influences because of the war. They needed external aid, so the only two countries that can give them external aid is the US with a robust economy and strong military, and the USSR, which had influence in Eastern Europe, and the military was only second to the US. So the world was divided into either you grant support for the US or you grant support for the USSR. The fact that everything else was destroyed, all the influences and major decision makers were put down by the war, suggested that the US and USSR could rise up and gain control. So hence, both wanted to assume world leadership role, both wanted to compete for dominance in post-war reconstruction, both wanted to extend influence, and hence this led to hostility and tensions between the two countries and between their allies and whichever country that supported them both. Okay, so we have the boxing gloves of the US versus the USSR. Next, we have satellite states containment, 1946. Okay, the Soviets started the satellite states and the US started the containment. And this only served to bring out the differences between the two countries. First, the Soviets, because Stalin wanted to gain control over set up pro-communist satellite states in Eastern Europe, Poland, Hungary and Czechoslovakia, to buffer states to protect the USSR, but this was interpreted as aggressive plan to spread communism. Hence, because of these satellite states, the US took steps to counteract the threat. And when you do this, you create hostility and you create a Cold War. So what did they do to counteract? cannot send a telegram that the Soviets were creating a sphere of influence. They were being very aggressive, and hence, because of this aggressiveness, a tough stance needed to contain communism. So this led to the change of policy from isolationism to containment to counteract Soviet influence. And of course, Churchill made his Iron Curtain speech, which further highlighted the difference and the suspicion of each other's intentions and motive and aggression. So similarly, this aroused Soviet suspicion, distrust, and led to tensions. Okay, so first satellite states led to containment policy, which all these things led to the further arousal of suspicion, distrust, tensions, and of course bipolarity and the Cold War. Okay, so containment here, we must contain the USSR in these places, and on the USSR side, suspicion of the US in that you must contain them from getting control of these places. Okay, so first step of containment policy is the Marshall Plan in 1947. Okay, first it was Truman Doctrine and then Marshall Plan, but I think we just focus on the Marshall Plan. So it's economic aid, remember, economic aid to Europe to rebuild, to revitalize, and it was also offered to the communist states, okay, to USSR and the satellite states, so that they won't be attracted to communism, okay, so that this would threaten US interests. So of course Stalin would feel threatened, this was undermining his Soviet influence. Okay, he felt that this issue was undermining his influence, especially to his satellite states. Okay, so in response, he came up with his own brand of Marshall Plan called Cominform and Comcon to provide mutual assistance to the satellite states to provide economic assistance of their own, but in reality it's just to protect the Soviet Union. Okay, so because of this plan and the Comcon and the Cominform, it split Europe into two different ideologies. Either you support the Marshall Plan or you support Cominform. Hence this whole Europe or the world was split into two sides, creating bipolarity, increasing tensions, and of course furthering the tensions of the Cold War. Okay, Marshall Plan. So Marshall Plan, you either belong to this group under the Marshall Plan or belong to this group under the Comcon and the Cominform. Okay, so hence there's bipolarity, this keyword, bipolarity. So what did the Westerners wanted to create Germany into a Western democratic Germany, West Germany. So Stalin disapproved of this, and he created the Berlin Blockade in order to divide Germany into two blocks. The blockade convinced the West that Stalin wanted control of West Berlin. You see, Berlin was also split between the West and the East. So in order for the West Berlin to have aid through the Marshall Plan, they needed supplies to be sent. But because the capital of Berlin is within the Soviet zone, the roads need to be open in order that the West can send the aid to West Berlin here, which belongs to the West. But Stalin decided to block this area so that the aid cannot come, and so that Western Berlin or Western Europe cannot be formed, so that Stalin can gain control over this part to starve out the Western Berlin people. But what did the US do? They sent airlifts, air aid to the West Berlin, and Stalin could not react because any reaction would be seen as aggressive to the world. Okay, so Stalin gave in, ended the blockade, and so the West pressed forward plans to have a West Germany because they knew Stalin cannot be trusted, and Stalin responded with a German Democratic Republic of East Germany. So the blockade led to a physical divide, a more prominent and obvious physical divide in Germany and Europe, whether you align with communists and the West, and of course this worsened tensions. So this is called the Berlin Blockade, and how it led to furthering of tensions in the Cold War. Okay, 1948, Berlin Blockade. So airlifts was sent. Yes, this is a map. So Berlin, this part is Soviet zone, but West Berlin here, they still needed supplies from the west, right? So this is the blockade that Stalin had, so that the supplies cannot go to West Berlin. But in the end, they use airplanes to bring the supplies here. Okay, so this further highlighted the tensions and the divide between East and West Germany, which further extended to East and West Europe, creating bipolarity. Okay, so the West responded because of Berlin blockade. They knew they cannot trust the West. The West cannot trust the Soviets anymore. So we need NATO, military alliances, led by the US to protect collective security against the Soviet Union. Because Soviets were doing all these things, such as the Berlin blockade, the takeover of Czechoslovakia, and their increased presence in Eastern Europe, led to increased suspicion of Stalin. So hence we must form our own military security force to deal with incoming threats from the communists. And of course the communists responded with the Warsaw Pact, their own military alliance with the satellite states against the US. So this led to division of two opposing camps who had strong militaries, and thus increasing hostility and tensions, and the escalation of the Cold War. Okay, because of this military alliance. NATO. Okay, NATO versus the Warsaw Pact here. Now, finally, you must understand one action led to another, causing more tensions, hostility, and bipolarity. So be careful the question now. If they ask you the dates, check the dates properly. Is it 1945? Is it after 1945? Is it before 1949? And that's when you can put the different actions. So red color symbolize Soviet actions, white color symbolize US actions, and yellow color symbolize both Soviet and US actions together. Okay, so Yalta and Potsdam first, then post-war Europe, then satellite states and containment, then the Marshall Plan, then Cominform and Comcon in response, then Berlin blockade in response, then NATO in response, and Warsaw Pact in response. So if the question asks you why certain things were created, like why the Marshall Plan, you can say that the Marshall Plan was formed because of Stalin's satellite states and Cominform. So you take one step back. Because of all these things, because of these things highlighted to them that the Soviets could not be trusted, and hence a Marshall Plan needed to be formed. Also because to make sure the states don't fall to communism. Okay? Or if they ask you how escalated tensions, you can also give a point that the Marshall Plan led to these things. Okay, so you either go backwards in your points or you go forward in your points. Okay, so Marshall Plan, after Marshall Plan, you can use the points after Marshall Plan. Because of Marshall Plan, Cominform, Comcon escalated tensions, or because of Marshall Plan, the Berlin blockade happened, or because of Marshall Plan, NATO and Warsaw Pact happened. Okay, if they say why Marshall Plan created, okay, you can say because to prevent the fall of the spread of communism, or because also that all these things highlighted the disagreements and that they needed to contain communism. Okay, so please understand this slide is very, very, very important. Okay, so that's it for the Cold War. It's a big chapter with many points, but there's a high chance that if you do the Sec 4 part of the paper, it will come out as one of the 8-mark question or 12-mark questions. Okay, thank you very much.